Jack Merryface here. Welcome to the original coding name channel, and I want to show you how to build this because it's quite fun. It's a fun little thing. A lot of CSS that I've used here, more than is perhaps necessary, but this is what we're going to build. So it's a link that looks pretty dope, and because I like Star Wars, I did a link to the Star Wars store for the Star Wars Squadron game, which you should definitely get if you don't have it already. And got some fun little animations and a little bit of a shroud, making it nice and dark like the Empire. So let's get cracking. Okay, so we're going to start from scratch. I've got live reload here, which is not going to work because I deleted everything. But I'm going to go ahead and jump in with a HTML5. And we're going to create the structure. So first off, I'm going to create a div. So it's going to be a class of container. And then we'll have an A tag. And the href is going to be the Star Wars Squadron's landing page. So I'm going to copy this, stick it in here, close this off. And then I will add just a p tag, where it says this is a link. Cool. And guess what? That's it for the structure. So let's get cracking into the CSS. It's going to close this, restart it, and there you go. Here we have it. So I'm going to close this off because I restarted it from scratch. And fantastic. So, CSS. First things first, let's have a look. Oh, it's still doing that, is it? And we're going to open the inspector tool here because it's always useful to have the inspector tool. And we're going to select our container. We're going to select our anchor. We're going to select our p tag. And we're going to add more selectors as we go along. But for now, let's just leave it as it is. First off, let's give our container a full body of itself. So 400 pixels. I'm making it bigger than I would normally use it, just so it's a bit easier to see on the screen. 260 pixels and height and 400 in width. And then what I'll do is I'll give it a border just so we can see the border. So we'll make it 1 pixel of solid black. It's funny how much I look at my keyboard now that I've got a giant microphone in the way. And that's not working. Why is this not working? I know why it's not working, because I didn't import the the styling. Good start. So, well, that shook my confidence. Styles, save. And that should be working. So let's close this. Let's close the port. Let's fire it up again. And there you go. Smashing. So we've got this. That's looking great. Off to a rocky start. But let's make the most of it. We'll do 5 pixels border radius, which will smooth around the corners, make it a little bit nicer. Great. Now I'm also going to be doing a lot of positioning, so I'm going to give this a position relative. And what that does is it's going to allow me to absolute position the other elements, which will help us. I am a massive fan of flex, but today we won't be using that. Right, let's go ahead and add the image. So I'm going to go background image. Background. I really need to look at my keyboard more than I've ever realized. So URL. We're going to go in here, get this dope picture, copy it, stick the URL in here, save it, and there you go. But you see, something's wrong there. So let's go ahead and fix that. So we're going to go to the next line, and we're going to go background size, and we're going to say cover. And that's going to make it just big enough to cover. But as you can see, image isn't exactly centered. So background position, and we'll center it And now the image is centered and it's looking pretty dope. Great, let's have a look at this text then, now that we've got this. But before we do that, now let's do the text quickly. We'll go ahead, we're gonna give it a white color so that it's more visible because we want to be user friendly. And font family, I'm just gonna take, I forgot which one I used. I think it was Gill Sounds. Yeah, I'll do. It's not the best. And then we'll do font size, and we'll make it 26 pixels as a random number. Boom. Sweet. So we've got this, and then if we click on this, it's going to take us to the EA Squadrons. Smashing. We've got this ugly red purple line. We'll get rid of that in a second. In fact, let's get rid of it now. It'll take 2 seconds. Text, decoration, none. And so now that line's gone. That was that quick. Right. So remember we're talking about positioning. So I'm going to go ahead and position this and make it a position absolute. And so that's going to allow us to do a bunch of stuff. But in order to do that stuff predictably, I'm going to get rid of all margin. And so now it's got no margin left. And so what I can do here is I can go ahead and stick it to the bottom. We'll say 20 pixels off the bottom. You see, so it's around there, but it's not in the center. So this is where I would love to use Flexbox and some margins, but instead, for the sake of animations, I'm going to use something called transform. So we're going to go left, and we're going to make it go 50% from the left border. But as you see, it goes beyond that because it goes 50% plus the length of the link, which is no good because we only want it to go half of the length of the link so that it's nice and centered. So this is where we use transform. Transform, please. There you go. And we're going to use transform translate X. So translate is going to help us go backwards by 50% of the length of the element itself. And it's centered very nicely. That's great and all, but as you notice, this is not a link. Only this is a link, and that's no good. We don't like that, so let's fix it. So I'm going to give this also a position of absolute, and then I'm going to put it bottom 0 and left 0. And then I'm going to give it a width of 100% and a height of 100%. Save, and now the whole thing is a link, yeah? Which is dope. So we've got the functionality, but now we need to make it look cool. Let's start with the text. I'd like it to increase in size and go to the center. So this is going to happen whenever we hover the div and not the p tag itself or the anchor tag itself, although that would come to the same as the container itself. But because the container is a parent element, I like to keep it consistent. So we're going to go dot container space p, dash hover, so colon hover p. And then when this happens, what's the p going to do? Well, first off, we're going to do bottom 50%, right? Because we want it to be up in the middle of the page. The other thing we want it to do is we're going to want it to translate downwards again, right? Because remember, if we go up 50%, it's going to be half of its height too much. So we're going to change transform, but we've got to change both, right? Because previously we just changed translate X, but you can't have one line doing translate X and one line doing translate Y. Instead, you have both. So you're going to do minus 50% and 50%. So now when we hover, it's nice and centered, and that looks really cool. The issue though, well, we've got one more thing to do. We want to change the font size, right? So let's make it a font size of 35 pixels. So now it's looking cool, but this jumpiness is ugly AF. So let's go ahead and fix that. In the p tag itself, I'm going to give it something called transition. And we're going to basically use this to create a very basic animation. So what we're going to transition, we're going to transition a couple of things. First of all, we're going to transition let's start with the font size, right? So we transition the font size. We're going to do it over 0.2 seconds, and we're going to ease in out. So that basically means it's going to accelerate and then slow down again. And so that's going to look dope like that, right? But as you can see, it's still jumping up. So let's chain these transitions. The next thing we're going to change is bottom, right? So I'm just going to copy this and post it here, save. And so now it does this, but as you can see, there's a little bit of a jump. And the reason for that is because we also changed transform. So let's chain a third value, which is going to be transform. Boom. And so nice and smooth. Cool. Right, so we're almost there. But I'd argue that we could do a little more and see it's the Empire, so like a little bit of a dark shroud over it. So let's see how we can do that. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and we're going to add that shroud to the container element. So I'm going to go below here, I'm going to go dot container, and I'm going to select something called after. Not after, after. So when we select after, we're essentially adding something immediately after the element that we've chosen. So in this case, container. And so we give it a content, but the content, we don't want anything in it yet. We just want it to be a shroud. So that's great and all, but how do we make it visible? How do we turn it into a shroud? Well, let's position absolute it because it is technically a child of the container itself. So we can give it a position absolute and its parent is a position relative, so that works. And we're going to give it bottom, if I can spell, I've been terrible typing today, bottom 0, left 0, great. And we're going to give it a width of 100% and a height of 100%. And in fact, we'll copy border radius of 5 as well. So height 100% and border radius 5 pixels. And then we're finally going to do the coup de grace. We're going to add a background. Now I'm going to start with a nice and ugly background. I'll give it red. Cool. And there you go. Right? Now that is ugly AF. So let's start with, let's do black, right? Because we want it to be nice and dark. So we save it as black. Right now, the issue is it's not visible. And also, I kind of wanted the text to be over it. I just want the shroud to be over the image, not the text. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to give it a Z index. I'll give it a Z index of 1. And then I'm going to go to the P and I'll give it a Z index of 2. And now that appears on top of it. Great. But there's the issue that we can't see the thing. Also, we want it to be a shroud. We don't want it to be black text. So I could just immediately give it an opacity, right, in here. Let's say opacity of 0.4, right? And then now that's a pretty cool shroud, but I kind of want to give it more of a oomph. And so there's this website called Css Gradient Io, which is really dope because you mess around with the gradient you want and then it creates the CSS for you, which is awesome. So I'm going to copy this because I already made it. It's wrong though right now. It's 180 degrees. I want it to be at 0 degrees. So do that. And then I'm going to stick it in here instead of this background. Oops. Right, now check this out. Now you've got this. It's not. Is that doing it? Let's see. Oh yeah, I've got the opacity. So let's get rid of this opacity. And there you go. So that's looking pretty dope and dark. Excellent. But we only want that shroud to appear when we hover over it, right? And as you can see, we've got this issue here. So we're going to give a Z index of 3. In fact, if we give A the Z index of 2, we can remove it from Z index of the P. And then the whole thing will go back to being a link. There you go. Right, so we only want this to appear when we hover. So let's think ahead. Remember we were talking about shrouds. So I'm going to undo this, give it an opacity of 0, so now it's invisible. And then I'm going to give it a transition of opacity. If I can type. It's going to be 0.2 seconds. And we're going to ease in out again. So it's all the same times. And 0.2 seconds, just, it's a time I like. You can use 0.2, 0.3, whatever. And I keep it consistent so it all happens, starts and ends at the same time. But you can imagine the sort of fun things you can do with this with a little bit creative thinking. And then what we're going to do is we're going to select the container after on hover. So let's go down here, dot container hover. This is why Sass is better sometimes. And after. So, and in here we're going to change the opacity. And let's say 0.7. So now, boom. How cool is that? Hells to the yeah. That's what I'm talking about. Okay, so now you've got this really cool like card where this is a link and you can click on it and it takes you to another part of the website or an external link or whatever, and that looks really, really cool. Also, because you're using a background image, you don't have to worry about accessibility in terms of alt text and that kind of stuff. So that's pretty dope. I hope you like this tutorial. I'm Tarek Merriface. I'll see you guys next time, and happy coding.